Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Eight million children live in a household with an addicted parent. That's nearly 1 in 10 kids in America that live in a household where either their mother, their father, or both parents have a substance abuse problem. I want to welcome Nikki Sanchez to the show today. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Dad.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good, thanks. Nikki, at what point, what age in your life did you realize or think maybe something was different in your household?
Probably about 6 or 7.
About 6 or 7. And what was that?
We were constantly going on vacations, and my parents always used to get in arguments because my mom used to sneak along alcohol on trips. So we'd always catch them arguing, and it made vacations a lot more uncomfortable and difficult.
Okay. What other things were different in your household, maybe than you didn't notice with your friends' households?
Well, when I went along on trips with my friends, I never used to have to breathalyze their parents before we got in the car.
Wow.
So, I mean, we spent a lot less time with my mom than other parents spent with their kids, and it was just a lot more difficult.
How about school? How was school? Were you involved in sports in school?
I did some extracurricular sports and stuff, not a whole lot, but I was on the soccer team for a couple of years.
Now, was mom at the games and stuff mom and dad come to the games?
They came to some of them. I mean, one parent was pretty much always there.
Yeah. How has growing up been different from your friends growing up in your social circles that you've seen?
Well, school was always my safe haven. I used to love going to school just to be able to get away, and I was always striving to succeed because I thought that was the way I could please my parents.
Okay, so you were looking to please your mom and dad?
Yeah, to get them to stop arguing, because I always used to think it was my fault that they were arguing about something I had done.
At what point did you realize it wasn't something that you did and what your parents were actually arguing about, which was your mom's alcoholism?
I mean, I guess it wasn't until I was 9 and I asked my mom if it was my fault that she told me it wasn't, that I really understood that it wasn't really my fault until she had fully explained it to me. And the program I went to help also explained to me that it wasn't my fault, and I was able to be introduced to other kids who thought maybe it was their fault and learned that it wasn't.
Okay, so your mom ended up going to treatment. How old were you when your mom went to treatment?
I was 9 when she went fully in treatment, but I was around 4 when she started doing outpatient therapy and stuff.
Okay. So it was 5 years from 4 to 9 that your mom was kind of in and out of her addiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how have things changed as far as your relationship with your mom now that she's gotten help?
We're definitely a lot closer now. I know that we have a really open relationship. We share a lot of stuff that I guess my friends don't really share with their parents, so they told me. Just we're a lot more open about relationships and dealing with the stresses and about drugs and alcohol, and we talk about stuff, and we're actually a lot more comfortable with each other because we know that I know that my mom will always accept me and that she trusts me and that I can be honest with her without her blowing up.
Are you afraid that your mom's going to relapse again?
I used to be, but I'm not anymore, just because I've realized that she has a really strong support system through not only her family, but she has a lot of friends who deal with the same problems. So I'm a lot more comfortable with the fact that she's not going to relapse.
Okay. How about yourself? Your experience with your mom and the household that had alcoholism in it, how has that changed your views and attitude towards alcohol, towards drugs? Because someone your age, your points of view may be, I'm not sure, but maybe a little different than some of your peers.
Well, they are. Like, I realize that alcohol, while it allows people to have more fun, it's not exactly a safe substance. Not only the effects on your actual body, but the effects on you mentally. I'm a lot more safeguarded about it. I know it's going to happen. I know it's high school. But I try to voice the fact that I think it should be done in moderation more than just going out and getting hammered every night. Like some high school kids, I know it's a lot more about stressing the fact that if you know kids are going to do it, to doing it in moderation, doing it smartly, not getting behind the wheel, always having a DD, a designated driver, just safety in doing it, because I know it's going to happen.
Are you ever afraid that you could end up an alcoholic like your mother was because it runs in the family?
I am, but it also leads me to be more careful with how much I drink, how often. It's just a lot more of a caution than is open about it as some other teens are.
We're joined now by Nikki's mom, Nora Sanchez. Nora, welcome to Inside Addiction.
Thanks, Dean.
We're talking today about 8 million children that live in a household in America with either their mother, their father, or both parents are substance abusers. It's nearly 1 in 10 children that's either a mom or dad or both parents are either alcoholics or drug addicts. It's a growing problem in the country. And first, I wanted to thank you for joining us on the show and allowing your daughter to come and share her experience, because a lot of people, there's 25 million Americans that are addicted to alcohol and drugs, but there's so many other people that are affected by addiction. Your children, your husband, your wife, your sister, your brother, your co-workers, your neighbors. So tell me, what was a turning point and what was your bottom?
My absolute bottom was when Nikki was 9 and she came to me and she had big brown eyes and she just looked at me and said, you know, was it something I did that caused you to drink again? And at that point I really thought I'd rather be dead. And something inside of me just changed, and I knew I was willing to do whatever it took to get sober, to stay sober. You know, up until that point, I don't think I was really willing to go to any length to do whatever it took. At that point, something inside of me just knew that whatever it took, I would do it. It didn't matter.
How was it being a mom and being an alcoholic and raising a child at the same time? We heard Nikki tell briefly about how she feels as though the alcoholism affected her. Mm-hmm. How do you think alcoholism and addiction affected you while you were actively using and being a mom? What stands out in your mind?
Well, you know, during the day I was like super mom, getting everything done and running around because I had my eye on the prize. At the end of the day, I knew that if I got everything accomplished, I could have my drink. And so every day I was running around and, you know, getting like a super mom. And but then I had an injury. Then I started drinking more for the pain, and started drinking earlier and earlier in the day. And that was very difficult because at that time my kids were 1 and the other one had just turned 3.
Wow.
And I had a neck injury where I had 3 herniated discs, but one was impinging on my spinal cord. And the pain was so bad that I had like shooting pains down my arm and everything. I really wasn't able to do much. And the doctor had put me on some muscle relaxants, but they worked much better with the alcohol. And that's when my addiction really, really started to take hold. And at that point, I just would do all I could do to get through the day, you know, trying to get the kids taken care of and, you know, get meals made. I couldn't really accomplish anything more than that. And because I was drinking for the pain and, you know, if in the morning I would get up and I would any driving I had to do, because I really didn't want to drink and drive. And so I would get up and I would do my grocery shopping or whatever. But then it was really just trying to accomplish what I needed to accomplish. And if I didn't, I'd have the shakes so bad, and all the symptoms of being in real.
So was there ever a point where you could just shut off that switch of wanting the alcohol, or in your case, needing the alcohol to numb the pain?
Was there ever a point where I could just shut it off?
Just not do it?
There wasn't a point where I could just do it until when she was 9 is when I said, I didn't care what it took. And it was funny because it wasn't until I stopped with the alcohol and everything that really helped ease my pain. I think a lot of being in the addiction and being caught up in that increases the pain level.
Sure, it magnifies it.
It does. It does.
It adds on you have the physical pain and then the emotional pain. And
right. And and it's funny, I volunteer up at the detox center every week, and I try to tell people that there are so many different ways that you can help with pain, but you really have to be your own advocate. I said, basically you can get anything you want from doctors. You really can.
Oh,
you can talk your way in and out of anything. But it's very important, because what you take goes into your body. You're the one that's going to suffer, and you're the one. If you're addicted, you're really going to suffer. And so you really have to be your own advocate. But there's all kinds of alternative medications, and the epidurals and everything for the pain management people. There are so many different ways that people can help alleviate pain. They don't have to take opiates. They don't have to take muscle. The things that you can get hooked on. There are a lot of other ways that they can do it. That the doctors aren't always right there to offer those up. So I tell people, you really have to be your own advocate, because it is your body, it is your life, and it really is a matter of life and death.
Absolutely. How did your alcoholism affect your family in other ways? The family structure. We heard Nikki talk about family vacations a little bit.
She has a sister, Cassie, who is a year older than she is, who protected Nikki, or tried to protect Nikki a lot of the time. And I think that's why Nikki wasn't really aware so much until you said probably around 7 or so. Cassie always tried to protect her. And she would hear us arguing some, but usually Cassie would, take her off to the side. And so it really made Cassie grow up much earlier than she should have had to. My husband became an enabler. He always had to chauffeur me, because I always drank in excess. I never just would go out, for dinner and have a glass of wine.
Yeah.
That was just the beginning. So, he always had to drive. And it just, everything, everyone has their role in an alcoholic family. The whole family is involved in playing a role that, especially when you start getting into recovery. I feel when like the one person who is in recovery, if they're the only one that's had any kind of treatment, sometimes it's very difficult, because while they're changing, the rest of the people are like, what's going on? Because the life that they've been living and knowing no longer is like existing, and they're out in the cold, like, what's going on? So for me, it was so important that my whole family got treatment at the same time.
Yeah, you went to the Betty Ford Center.
I did.
And Nikki, you were involved in the family program.
Yeah, the children's program.
Program.
My husband went to the family program. Cassie and Nikki went to the children's program. And that way we all learned, they were able to learn about the addiction, because I know, for one, if I didn't have an addiction, I would find it very, very difficult to understand.
Oh, absolutely, especially at a younger age. The first thing you want to do is blame yourself and say, what part did I take in this? What sort of things did you learn in the children's program?
Well, I learned that it wasn't my fault, and that, my mom had the addiction, and that it wasn't even her fault. It was a disease. It wasn't a choice. It wasn't a choice of lifestyle. It wasn't
that your mom loved alcohol more than she loved you. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Because so many people take that point of view of, if you loved me, fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, such a big part of addiction are the relapses, and you burn bridges because people say, well, you've told me before you're going to stop. Well, when we say that, we really mean we're going to stop, but we can't always do that, and so you have a relapse and everything, and people that don't have an addiction can't understand that. They think that you're just lying to them, for whatever reasons. And whereas, your whole heart means you're going to stop, but you're just not able. Something really inside of you has to change. For me, I really felt it had to be something spiritual, had to change. Something inside of me, in my soul, in my heart, changed. That enabled me to make the changes.
That day that Nikki asked you if it was her fault that you drank, you think that was a moment of clarity?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
And if I had been any older, I would have started growing more resentment. I think it's the fact that I was such a young age. It was easier for me to get over it versus some kids, like their parents are still drinking to the point where they leave the house. And I think it's a lot more resentment grows the older the child gets. And I really feel like while it's difficult when you're a young kid, when you start to grow up and fully grasp the situation, more resentment grows because you still don't understand the addiction. And you're able to let that anger grow. Like your parents weren't there at that big game. Your parents, just the more issues add up and it's harder to reconcile that.
Mm-hmm.
What were some of the challenges you had to overcome and that you were faced with when you went into treatment? Because I would imagine you went to treatment, so you literally had to, as much as at times your alcoholism, your addiction had a very strong effect on your family, it's still not the same as literally physically being removed from your family, going to the opposite side of the country for help. How do you do that?
Well, I'll tell you, I cried like the whole plane ride. I got to Chicago and had to change planes, and every ounce of me wanted to get on another plane and come right back to Albany, but I didn't. And then I've got the alcohol cart going up and down the aisle, and I'm thinking, there's nobody here policing me. I can. And at that point, I had been sober for 3 months when I went into treatment.
So you literally got on a plane by yourself in New York, went out to the Betty Ford Center. There's an alcohol cart going up and down the aisle.
Yep. And I had been sober for 3 months, but I just knew, so many people, when you relapse, they don't make it back in. People out there, you die. So many people die from this disease.
I've said that several times. People ask me all the time is what keeps it green for me. I carry obituaries in my back pocket. In fact, I have them right now.
Yeah. And I go to the detox center every week.
Of my friends and people that I know that didn't make it back. People, like you said,
Yes.
with one obituary is a person that had 13 years sober.
Yeah.
Went back out and didn't come back in.
Yeah. And, I think I was afraid that if I didn't go when I went, if I relapsed, I may never make it. And so also another thing that was hard for me at that time was my insurance wouldn't cover it either. So I pretty much had to drain my bank account to go. But I thought, if I don't, I may never make it. I may not live to make it into recovery.
Are you afraid that Nikki may take the same steps that you did?
Well, I wonder about it sometimes. But she's got a good head on her shoulders, and at least she has the knowledge and the education of the disease. And when I was growing up, nobody ever talked about it, and it wasn't until I said, I'm an alcoholic, that I found out there was alcoholism on both sides of my family, but nobody ever talked about it because of the stigma, and everything. And I just see that's so unfortunate. It's so unfortunate, and I can't say that I would have done anything that much differently, but at least I would have had the knowledge about the disease, because I really thought, for the first 25 years of my drinking, I really thought I was a social drinker. I really did. And anybody who had ever looked at me and watched me would have known that I was an alcoholic from day one.
You were the only one that didn't see it.
I was the only one that didn't see it. But I surrounded myself with people who drank just like I did. But I always drank for effect. I always drank as much as I could get. You know, I never left half a drink. You know, somebody would say it's time to go, I would slam down that drink. You know, I never, I showed every single sign. I was a blackout drinker from the time I was 13 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, but I didn't know that wasn't normal. I was very naive to the whole thing, which is why I found it so important for my family to get educated on it, because I was so naive to it that I really felt that worked against me, and I didn't want that for my family. And so I wanted to make sure that they knew, and that way they can at least have the knowledge and go into it with open eyes. And you know, yes, they are more prone than, you know, someone who doesn't have the history, but they also know that the recovery is very possible.
Absolutely. I've always thought, you know, no one's immune to addiction, but recovery is contagious. Mm-hmm. And now Nikki has already been exposed to this,
yeah,
before the age of onset.
Yeah.
How do you think your relationship with Nikki has changed? And how do you think your relationship would be now if you hadn't gotten help?
I hate to think how, if I would even have a relationship now. I don't think I would have a marriage, first of all. And my guess is I would probably not have custody of my children, because I don't think my husband would let that happen. And if I had continued drinking the way I was drinking, I'm not sure if I would be living. So, you know, all I can say about that is that would have been really bad. As far as our relationship now, like Nikki was saying, it's very open. We can talk about just about anything, and that's wonderful. You know, she knows that there are some things that wouldn't please me, but there's nothing that she could say that would turn me away from her, ever.
How has your life overall changed? I know you said you drank for 30 years. I always, just out of curiosity, what was your occupation? Because one of the biggest things, I think, with alcoholism and addiction, I've always said this, I've always thought this, you know, the alcoholic's not the bum with a brown paper bag in the back of the bus that hasn't taken a shower. The drug addict's not the junkie with a needle sticking out of his arm. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is to break down the stigma. So I'm always curious, because it literally crosses all boundaries, all professions. Mm-hmm. So just out of curiosity, nothing more. What was your profession? What was your occupation?
Well, from the time I turned like 16, I started working in restaurants. And then when I turned 18, I started tending bar. Always tended to surround myself, as I said, with people who drank a lot. And then when I was in my 20s, I started to work as a flight attendant, and flew from one bar to another.
It's the best transportation. I've heard that from pilots, actually. You never see a plane get pulled over.
No. And I got to drink all around the world. Yeah. Couldn't speak all the languages, but I could order my cocktail in any language.
Interesting. What would you like to share with others, in particular, your point of view for moms out there, for fathers also, that are suffering from alcoholism or addiction? What would you say to a mom with a 4-year-old child, 9-year-old child, 15-year-old child?
Just the sooner the better. And you know, even as much damage as you may have done with your relationship so far, there's always, if you get sober and you do the next right thing, there's always room to repair it. You know, I think also it's very, very important to educate your kids on the disease, because if you have the disease, they're going to be more prone to it. I think that's really important. And I think just communication, talking about it, is so important. You know, so many people don't talk about it. It's like taboo, and I think that works against addiction in so many ways, because I think it really needs to be discussed. It needs to be brought out in the open. We need to get rid of the stigma attached to it. It's, you know, it is a disease. It needs to be treated as a disease, and but I think that people also need to know that that kids are highly affected by it. You know, it causes long-lasting issues. You know, it causes anxiety that doesn't just go away. It causes problems for the kids because of growing up in that kind of atmosphere, and those problems stay with them. And so, you know, the sooner that the parent can, you know, face their problem head on, and I'll tell you, well, recovery is great. You know, recovery is awesome. Living a sober life is fantastic. Waking every morning with a clear head, you know, and not wondering, you know, who you upset the night before, or who you owe apologies to, or
where you
anything.
are.
Yeah, yep, all those things. And waking up, you know, with and having serenity in your life and in your heart and in your soul is a beautiful thing, which I didn't have for as long as I can remember. You know, it's wonderful, and to be able to share in my kids' lives, you know, 100%, rather than just when I felt like it, or, you know, whatever. It's a huge difference.
How about you, Nikki? What would you share with someone your age, other kids that may be in a household? I mean, 1 in 10, it's a pretty high number.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, I think the stigma and the need for silence is one of the most dangerous things to addiction. But if you think your parent or someone else's parent has a problem, don't feel uncomfortable asking for help. There are tons of people out there who, if they don't know what to do, they can find someone. Your teachers, guidance counselors. I mean, there's so many people you can ask for help and who will be there for you. And I think that's one of the things is, like, your teachers aren't going to judge you for it. I mean, yes, they may have a distinct problem with your parent because of it. I mean, there is help out there, and even just having someone as simple to talk to about it, it really helps. And knowing that there are so many people out there, and not being afraid to ask for help is something I'd really stress for anyone who's might be having a parent dealing with problems.
Again, I want to thank Nora and Nikki. We taped the show during summer vacation, and all the different things you could be doing on summer vacation, how your summer vacations have changed. I really appreciate you coming out and sharing with other kids. And obviously, Nora, I really appreciate you allowing your daughter to come and share, and you sharing as well. So I want to thank you. And hopefully the statistics of 1 in 10 children being in a household with at least one parent that's an alcoholic or a drug addict, those numbers can slowly but surely change to, you know, 1 in 10 kids has a family member, a mom, a dad, or parental figure that's in recovery.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.